Hi students, and welcome to my presentation on human development theories and theorists. Let me open this up. So I'm going to just briefly go over some of the slides. I didn't want to do the full presentation because you'll just zone out by the time we get to the end, but I'm going to introduce some of the theorists and some of their concepts. But let's first explore what theories do. And it says theories provide a framework for organizing and understanding the thousands of observations we make in the daily behaviors that occur in every aspect of development. I can't tell you how often I look at children and I think about every moment that they are developing and that we are observing them. We're seeing things that are occurring, but it's what we're not seeing that's occurring that we don't ever really think about. So theories are not facts, but they allow us to question norms, suggest hypotheses, and provide us lots of guidance rooted in research. Thus, theories are practical and applied. They help us frame and organize our millions of experiences. And so two of the first theorists were Freud and Erikson, and they align quite extensively with starting with the ages and stages kind of thing, the 0 to 1 oral stage, 1 to 3 the anal stage, 3 to 6 was phallic stage, 6 to 11 a latency stage. And the same for Erikson, trust versus mistrust in the 0 to 1, 1 to 3-year-olds, autonomy versus shame and doubt. 3 to 6 is the initiative versus guilt, and 6 to 11 industry versus inferiority. They're very intertwined in a lot of ways. And by the time we get to the end stage with Freud, he has adolescence, genital stage, and he believed that adulthood, that the genital stage lasted throughout adulthood. But Erikson proposed that it didn't stop there, that there were other stages. And I agree with Erikson in this sense, is that there is the intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and integrity versus despair as you get into older age. Watson was the founder of behaviorism and proponent of learning theory. He believed that behaviorism was a theory of human development that studied observable behavior. Behaviorism is also called learning theory because it describes the laws and processes by which behavior is learned. There are classical conditioning. Ivan Pavlov, classical conditioning describes the learning that occurs when one stimulus is linked to another. Such as, I always think of the dog. The dog begins salivating at the sound even when there was no food because he had been classically conditioned. And then there's operant conditioning, when the reinforcement or punishment that follows an action and guides future behavior as asserted by B.F. Skinner, aka rewards and punishments, which I do not agree with because I think it removes the internal motivation for children to want to to behave well. And I think it's really important that we address the free will of a person and not force them to do things that they don't want to do, but yet teach them to guide them in being motivated to do things. So social learning theory. Social learning theory recognizes that people learn by observing others. Children are particularly susceptible to social learning theory as they model their behavior. First, after their parents, and then after popular and famous people. And I would say this is so true for peers in the environment, and then we go into the, older peers, and then our church, and I think of Bronfenbrenner as we're going to explore briefly, but the macro system is so much larger. So one of the most famous is cognitive theory, Piaget, information processing, and I won't go over too much, but he developed the ages and stages, which I mentioned earlier. And sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete, and formal operations. So in the sensory motor, they understand the world through their senses. Pre-operational, understand the world through language and mental images, and are not yet at that abstract stage and then they transition into the concrete operational, understanding the world through logical thinking and categories, and then formal operations, understands the world through hypothetical thinking, abstract, and scientific reasoning. So it isn't until way later on that they really understand concrete and abstract thinking in a solidified way. Cognitive theory, information processing, I think of the computer. Information processing, a perspective that compares human thinking processes by analogy to computer analysis of data, including sensory input, connections, stored memories, and output. Sensory registry, input devices, ACD, for example, short-term memory, central processing unit, and long-term memory hard drive. So that's the way I kind of think of it. And there's a nice little image. You have the input, the decision-making, the output, and the feedback. And if you put this in terms of a preschooler, the teacher asks the child, you got 5 more minutes before we have to clean up. The child decides, okay, I better finish up my work so I can move forward. The output is they actually do finish up in that 5 minutes and they get ready for that transition. And the feedback is they comply with the request. And then again, they go and line up for the next set of information. So that's just a way to think about it. Sociocultural theory, which I very much align with, is Vygotsky and beyond, which we are exploring in this course because I think Vygotsky addressed a lot and there's a video here for you, but he addressed the cognitive development of children in a way that was connected with social development. So a couple of his concepts were zone of proximal development is defined as the range of tasks that a child can perform with the help and guidance of others, but cannot yet perform independently. So there's other concepts attached there. Taking culture into account as well, the sociocultural perspective has led contemporary scientists to consider social context in every study. So earlier theorists did not do this. This approach considers cultural differences between nations, religions, cohorts, and ethnic groups, so forth and so on. Right? The sociocultural theory is considered one of the most multicultural because of that sociocultural aspect and view. Universal perspective was humanism. The theories of Maslow and Rogers witnessed 2 world wars, concluding that psychological theories are focused on evil, not good. Hence, 2 new theories were born. Abraham Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What a man can be, he must be. And there is his famous pyramid, and there's at the bottom, we start here, the psychological needs. Basically, this says that human basic needs need to be met before you can move to the next one, which is also we need to ensure safety for children, and then also provide love and affection and, a sense of belonging. And then the esteem comes along, including the family and making sure that the child feels that there's a place in the environment for them. And then the self-actualization, which is the child now belongs, and it affects their morality, creativity, spontaneity, et cetera, problem solving. Yeah. Okay. So humanism, Carl Rogers believed that people should give each other unconditional positive regard, which means that they should see regard to each other with appreciation, without conditions, unconditional. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. And boy, do we need some of this humanism in our world today. So here is the image for that, which is self-image, and then the ideal self. So we always are aiming just outside of ourselves to always improve. And the closer to our self-image and ideal self are to each other, the more consistent and congruent we are, and the higher our sense of self-worth. So the universal perspective evolution is Gangestad and Simpson. And during the last 2 decades, the study of evolutionary foundations of human nature has grown at an exponential rate. In fact, it is now a booming interdisciplinary scientific enterprise, one that sits on the cutting edge of the social and behavioral sciences. And then evolution also studies the history of human characteristics. Adults protect their young children to ensure their survival, selective adaptation to the process by which a living creature, including people, adjust to their environment, etc. Overactive imagination or crushing anxiety could be considered normal. Evolutionary explanations for sex differences. I guess we could have a whole conversation on that one. And then the glorious Bronfenbrenner, which I believe captures all of these concepts right here. And the child is in the center. And this is the child and, all of his information. And then it goes to the microsystem, which is the school, the family, sports, etc., peers. And then just outside of that, there's the teacher, friends, parents, and then the exosystem. I'm sorry, that was the mesosystem. And then the exosystem, grandparents, cousins, etc., schools, holiday activities. And you step out even further at the macro system, which are the values, the economy, politics, national customs, etc. And then there's another layer to that, which is the chronosystem, and it's new birth in the family, or death in the family and development overall. Okay, so the eclectic perspective, which is the ultimate goal for the early childhood educator, is to take from all of these different theories and many more, and we put them together in a way that really helps us to best understand children. So defined means the approach taken by most developmentalists, in which they apply aspects of each of the various theories of development rather than curing exclusively to one theory. So we should never prescribe to just one theory. And that's something that in the Tools of the Mind book you will find Vygotsky believed that there was no exact prescription, that we cannot make one application to all children. Every child is individual, every child is different, and we use these theories to guide us and help us understand that development. So I believe that is the end of the presentation, and I do thank you so much for attending.